Announcing participant.
Rob. Thought you were going in today, Robert.
No, I'm not today. Next week I think I will.
Nice. I did look at all those pictures, and Chambers looks great.
Yeah, I mean, everything looks good. Really well written, so.
Nice. I think everyone's in Chambers.
Good, except for us.
Hey, I'm not.
Oh, hi. I just got a message from Jeffrey that everyone's there, so I'm just wondering if, and we're live, so I haven't heard anything. Oh, I hear the gavel. Bye.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Community Issues Committee meeting for Monday, June the 22nd, 2020. My name is Deputy Mayor Jeffrey Kaufman. We'll start with the Acknowledgement Statement. The City of Lethbridge acknowledges that we are gathered on the lands of the Blackfoot people of the Canadian Plains and pays respect to the Blackfoot people past, present, and future, while recognizing and respecting their cultural heritage, beliefs, and relationships to the land. The City of Lethbridge is also home to the Métis Nation of Alberta, Region 3. Before we move into the meeting, can we do a roll call, Madam Clerk, please?
Councillor Campbell.
Here.
Councillor Carlson.
Here.
Councillor Croson.
Here.
Councillor Higgin.
Here.
Councillor Morrow. Councillor Mirashiro.
Here.
Acting Mayor Parker.
Here.
Deputy Mayor Kaufman.
Present.
Mayor Spearman.
Present.
Thank you very much. For members of council that are present in chambers, you see the new setup. At the moment, just ask you to be very, very cautious of the plexiglass, as the facilities folks have not got the feet on the back end of them yet, so they are a little flimsy. So try your hardest not to poke the glass. Please don't tap on the glass. It will disturb the animal next to you. Thank you very much. I have a motion in front of me from Acting Mayor Parker, the approval of the minutes. Be it resolved, the minutes of the Community Issues Committee meeting of City Council held on Monday, May 25th, 2020 be approved, and the Deputy Mayor and City Clerk be authorized to sign and seal the same. Acting Mayor Parker.
If there's any changes that need to be done, otherwise I would just call the question on that, Mr. Deputy Mayor.
Seeing or hearing no errors or omission, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. I have a motion in front of me from Councillor Carlson, adoption of the agenda. Let the agenda of the Community Issues Committee meeting of Monday, June 22nd, 2020 be adopted, including all communications as submitted by the City Clerk. Madam Clerk, do we have any additions to the agenda?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Kaufman. I don't have any additions. The mayor mentioned an addition, though. Did you?
It's had a request for a brief in-camera meeting following the regular meeting.
Yes, please.
You can update the agenda. Councillor Carlson.
Thank you. Unless there's anything further, motion to accept the agenda as amended.
Question has been called. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Move into presentations. Item 4.1, COVID update. Mr. City Manager.
Good afternoon. Nothing significant to report other than what was reported last Friday. Just a reminder, the ECC is no longer meeting on Monday, so we will not be receiving an update Monday prior to this meeting, but I'll defer to the Acting Director of Emergency Management, who has a couple of points.
Acting Director.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Not a whole lot to update in terms of COVID for the city. We're looking at 4 active cases, total of 36 with 32 have recovered. As of last week, with the closure of the Fritz and the transition back to the permanent homeless shelter and the closure of the self-isolation unit, our emergency social services team has also been demobilized and put on a standby alert in case we do need to mobilize them again quickly. We anticipate that the changeover should go quite well, and we're looking at demobilizing the ECC in a couple of weeks here. But for the meantime, we do need to keep our team active and staying on top of the situation.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Members of Council, any questions? Madam Clerk, any questions from online? Nothing? Excellent. Thank you very much. We appreciate the work that you've been doing and keeping us updated. Thank you. I have a motion from Councillor Hagan, COVID-19 update. Be it resolved that the Community Issues Committee accept this report and presentation for information, and further be it resolved that Craig Dalton, City Manager, and Mark Rathwell, Director of Emergency Management, be thanked for their presentation. Councillor Hagan.
And Mark, but we will thank them for their presentation. Thank you. A call for the vote.
Question has been called. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Item 4.2. MDP 2020 review project update. Mr. Bazunas, Ms. Gehring, and is that Ross? Mr. Kilgore. Please proceed when you are ready.
Oh, good afternoon, members of City Council and Your Worship. Our presentation today will be given by myself, Maureen Gehring, Ross Kilgore, our Senior Community Planner, and Byron Bazunas as our Project Manager. It will follow the slide above. Our Municipal Development Plan is under review. It has been for a while now. We first checked in with City Council in January of 2019. There's been a lot of important work that has happened over the past 10 years, and that's where staff started, so as not to duplicate any efforts or information. Staff also kept you informed throughout the review so far. It has been about 6 months since we last chatted to you about the project. One of the biggest changes to the document is a rethink of the current policy areas as outcomes. This has allowed us to be more specific in terms of policy areas and the content. And we did several evaluations and analysis to ensure that we didn't leave anything behind from the current plan moving forward into the new one with this new focus on outcomes. From Council's review of January in 2019, there were some areas pointed out to us, such as relationships and economic development, that were not very robust in our current municipal development plan. So we have engaged in those areas. And we were able to do some actual in-person sessions prior to April, and since then have switched over to virtual and online methods since then. And so I will turn it over to Ross for just a quick overview of our policy areas.
So as we have limited time, I'll just kind of give you an overview of the way that these slides are set out. And then you have them in your agenda packages. So if you want to ask any specific questions afterwards, we can get into more detail. Okay. So using this first slide as an example, we see at the top the title of the policy area, so in this case, places. Then we have a number of subsections under there. So for example, parks and open spaces is a type of place that we find throughout the city, river valley and commercial areas and so on. And then under those in italics, we have the objective of those policies. So we don't set out all the policies, the draft policies here, because that would make it a much longer presentation. But we can see the objective of the parks and open spaces policies is to preserve and enhance Lethbridge's parks and open space system to ensure access is available to all. Then down the right-hand side of each of these slides, we have the icons from the current MDP, which, as we saw on a previous slide, show the outcomes. So from top to bottom, we have a prosperous city, a healthy and diverse city, culturally vibrant city, a well-designed city, environmentally responsible city, and a city that supports the region. So in each of these slides, we've grayed out any of the outcomes that aren't contributed to by this policy area. So we can skip through the next few slides. As I mentioned, these are all in your agenda package, so if you'd like to ask us any more detailed questions about those at the end, we'd be happy to answer those questions. Byron will go into some more detail on the schedule.
So prior to the pandemic, our schedule was like this. And we had hoped to be done with a council decision for you by October, November of this year. Can I have the next slide? As a result of the pandemic, there was some time lost just reacting to that. And we switched over to drafting some policy areas and those sorts of things while we figured out what to do about public engagement. So now you can see that the public engagement is going to take a little bit longer than a public open house would have, because we are going to do that over July and August online. Following that, then council will have an opportunity, as you expressed in your workshop in January, to engage with specific groups that you want to hear from. That will occur through September and October. If council needs a bit more time, that might take a bit more time, and if council has fewer that they want to talk to, then that might go faster. In the end, we will be to you with a draft of the document sometime in January next year, and then it will work through its regular council process towards a decision on the MDP with the required readings and public hearings, and the council decision then is expected around April of 2021. Go ahead. Yep. So as you can see here, this is just a written out version of the schedule. What we're doing now is we're consulting with business units internally. We're then going to have online public engagement through July and August, and then a council review with your engagement, and then following that, January for a council review of and decision. So we'll take any questions you might have now.
Excellent, thank you. Thank you all for the presentation. Questions from members of council. Start with Councillor Carlson.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Thank you, Ms. Gehring, and Mr. Bazunas and Kilgore for the presentation of materials you sent out. Question on the policy areas, if I can. I know limited time, you didn't get to dive into them too deeply, but you did provide us a lot of information review. Question around the policy area regarding arts, culture, and heritage. It seems to be incredibly light. In fact, the only one dealing with arts and culture is just a copy and paste from community well-being. I'm wondering if that's going to be expanded or if that's just not a high priority in a municipal development plan.
Is this me? Hello. Thank you for the question. So these policy areas, or the subsections under the policy areas, contain a number of draft policies. So although arts, culture, and heritage has only 2 subsections, there are a number of policies under each. Certainly, once we share the draft policies with you, we'd be interested to hear if you think there's anything missing from there.
Okay, and those will be shared with us at what point in the timeline?
Right. So we're currently working on the internal engagement with business units to make sure that we're covering everything that they're correctly that they're able to work on and that they're planning to work on, and the best ways to have some directions and some implementation steps to contribute to these outcomes. So once that's complete, we expect to bring the draft policies that will be more refined by that point to council around about September.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Carlson. I don't see anybody else on the board. I'll ask a couple of questions. Under the policy areas, when these actually make their way into the MDP, how do subsequent councils tweak or enhance, hopefully enhance, upon the policy areas? Is that opportunity going to be built into the MDP as well?
So currently how we have it formatted is each policy actually has a direction and an implementation method. And so we can see where over time, as actions get completed, new actions are going to need to be added. And so that possibly will address sort of how this document changes over time.
Excellent. Okay, so it makes the document much more organic.
Yes.
It's not that the ICSP MDP wasn't, it's just I don't think we really enacted that kind of approach to it in my assessment over the years that it's been in place.
There wasn't a strong implementation metric, no.
Okay, thank you. On the implementation metrics or the issue of KPIs, I'm assuming those are going to be clearly identified then, as you say, when things get checked off and things need to be added. We're going to have key performance indicators for each policy area.
Yes, so as Ross worked on the London Road, ARP, he did an implementation strategy, and that was brought forward to council sort of every 6 months or so. We had some short-term things, we had some medium and longer term. So we anticipate that we'll sort of follow the same type of format. It'll look a little bit different, obviously, because it's not so specific to a smaller area, but that's what we're sort of envisioning.
Okay, thank you. And final question, what's public engagement going to look like? What are you thinking? And we won't hold you to it until you come with a public engagement plan, but what are you thinking in terms of getting the community involved and providing feedback?
So at this point, we've been working with our engagement team and communications for using the Get Involved Lethbridge website. And so that's sort of where everything is going to be funneled through.
We imagine, because if we were to get into the weeds of every single individual policy, that's a lot to ask of the public to look through that amount of information. So we imagine it might be more based around higher level things like, do we have the right objectives for the policies? Is this what you want us to try and achieve with the policies?
Excellent. If I could just follow up on that, then how are you planning then on of getting sort of that point counterpoint or that engagement for that will help the community sort of navigate to a specific point?
So one of the first exercises we did was actually have a look at our SSRP compliance documents. So that was a huge project, and we really involved community stakeholders in the various aspects of that, such as the environment, for instance. And so we have taken all of that information and then translated it into how does it fit within the current MDP, where are areas that we're missing, and so we've used those existing sort of documents that we've done already as that a little bit of a goalpost, right? To understand that we're not so far off, this has already been expressed by the community, and then so going back to them afterwards and understanding from them, is this sort of how you can see it coming forward in a policy type document? Because the SSRP was not policy driven, it was just simply information.
Exactly, thank you. Madam Clerk, anybody online have questions? Any other members of council have questions? Hearing none, we'll take it that was the information we require at this time. Excellent. Thank you very much. Thank you all for your work on this and the continued effort towards it. Thank you. I have a motion from Councillor Miyashiro, Municipal Development Plan 2020 Review Project Update. Be it resolved that the Community Issues Committee accept this report and presentation for information, and further be resolved that Maureen Gehring, Ross Kilgore, and Byron Bazunas be thanked for their presentation. Councillor Miyashiro.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. The Planning and Development Department has done a tremendous amount of work on this plan, and I'd like to thank them for their update they've done, and I ask that council support this.
Thank you very much. If I could just ask that people online try to speak into their phones. We're having some challenges hearing it. The clerk has increased the volume here, but it just, clarity seems to be a bit of an issue today. Thank you. Any further debate on this from members of council? Members of CIC, sorry. Seeing none, I'm going to assume the question's been called. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Sorry, we'll move on to agenda item 4.3, Mobility and Accessibility Master Plan. Chris Witowski, Project Lead, Mobility Accessibility Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor and members of council. My name is Chris Witowski. I'm the Parks Planning Manager of the City of Lethbridge, and I'm also the project lead for the Mobility Accessibility Master Plan. I have a challenge today because I have 2.5 years of work and a project to put into 8 minutes. So it's a little bit of a hard thing to do. I've been trying to work on it for the last few days, but I'd like to make this presentation as impactful as I can because I have such a short amount of time. So I'm going to ask if you can please engage with me in a little bit of an outside-the-box presentation, and I'm going to ask if you can please close your eyes, and anyone else who has not heard this presentation before, if you can please close your eyes for the first third of the presentation, and I promise there is a point to this, and it will drive home a message that I hope to achieve in this. So if your eyes are closed, there's 3 questions that I want to answer today, answer for you through this presentation. That is, why is this plan important? Why are we here today in front of you? And what are we asking of council in the future? So the first part, why is this important? I get this question a lot. Why is this plan so important? Why are we devoting resources to this if it just affects a minority of the population? If you could see the slides right now, you would see pictures of 3 pieces of deficient infrastructure, but you can't see those right now because you are temporarily blinded, and you have to rely on me to describe these pictures to you. One of them is a wheelchair ramp that doesn't really lead to anywhere, it just leads to grass and a curb. One of them is a wheelchair ramp along a roadside with notches for visual impairment that leads into the middle of the road and not into the crosswalk. And the third one is just a picture of a pretty poor paving job and a bench that I don't think anybody could sit on, nor could anybody get to. So the point to this is that we are all temporarily able-bodied. At some point, you are going to have or be affected by this. Whether it's being blinded for 5 minutes, being in crutches for 6 weeks while you're dealing with a broken ankle, or if you're in a wheelchair for the rest of your life. So we all are impacted by this, so it is important. And it doesn't affect just a minority of the population, it does affect all of us at some point. So you can open up your eyes now. Thank you very much for participating. If I had a little more time, I would have done a little more of that with you, but I think, hopefully that just kind of starts to drive home the point of why we're doing this plan. If you can go to the next slide, please. If you can go down to the engagement slide. Right there. So for those online, there's an engagement slide with 6 dates on there. And 2 pictures. I did submit this presentation a few weeks ago, so I can't get to every slide on here. So the second question I want to answer, why are we here today? Well, we're here to present the project to you. I can't present all the information in the time that I have, so I want to focus on this slide because it's public engagement and stakeholder engagement. This was such a key element to this project. This is not really a report driven by administration. This is driven through the stakeholders and the feedback that we got from them. So we had a stakeholder group. We did 3 meetings with invited stakeholders. These are people with lived experience. These are people who are aid workers, family workers. They all deal with these issues on a day-to-day basis. And then we also did 3 public engagement sessions just to get the feedback of the general public. Some of the stakeholders we met through the public engagement sessions, and we brought them back through the stakeholder engagements. We've got a lot of good feedback from them. This plan is driven largely by that stakeholder involvement. Anything that you have read in that plan, if you have seen it, is driven largely through this stakeholder engagement. We did do, as part of engagement, as part of the assessments, we did do some internal business unit assessments. We did do a simulation exercise ourselves. We did a 4-hour session of some visual loss exercises and some wheelchair exercises. So it gave us a little bit of a perspective of what the stakeholders are going through. And we also have the stakeholder engagement. Third question I want to answer is, what are we asking of City Council? And if you could please go to towards the end, there's a title called 13 focus areas right there. Yep. If you go back to the A, yep. So what are we asking of City Council? We're asking that if you can bring this to a regular meeting of City Council, and if you could formally accept the plan in whatever form that is. I don't know if it's filed and received. I don't know the exact terminology. I think we have that set for July 13th, and we're asking if you can bring that and formally acknowledge it so that we can start working on the implementation of some of the recommendations out of the plan. And really quickly, I just want to go over a few of these. I'm not going to go over all 13, but there are a couple that I want to highlight. The first 3 on this plan really are about assessment, doing more assessments. Where are we with our infrastructure? The key one here is assess the current conditions. That's probably going to be the recommendation that has the biggest upfront capital costs, because we have to understand what's our infrastructure like right now. Where are we strong? Where are we weak? What do we have to improve? Everything kind of builds off of that. Next slide, please. The next couple recommendations are all based around standards. It's about finding new ideas. It's about finding new accessibility ideas and ideas. And what can we test? We can test those ideas. We have RELD. We have a development wing of our organization. We can test ideas there. We can test ideas through different infrastructure projects, and we can create standards out of them. Next slide, please. And then the last two slides, H through J, and then the next slide as well, are all about the actual mobility through the city, about the movement through the city. The one I would like to highlight, if you go back one, is collaborate to minimize winter city challenges. This is a big reality. It's something we've heard a lot about as we talk to the stakeholders. Winter is a big issue. It's something we are always going to have to deal with. Snow and ice, for a lot of us, we can navigate through that, but a lot of people we're hearing are homebound because they just can't get out during here. We can have a great snow clearing on the roads, great snow clearing on transit stops, but if the pathway and sidewalk to get to those are not cleared, the barrier is just as great. So that's going to be a big challenge, something we have to look at operationally and possibly from a capital expense as well. And then the rest of them are also about transit and about enforcing and evaluating those regulations and recommendations. That's the basics of the plan. That's what I want to give to you today in the time that I had. I would like to just quickly say I would be remiss if I did not thank Urban Matters and Universal Accessible Design, who helped us with this, guide us through this plan. I'd like to thank the Mobility Master Plan team. There's 10 plus business units that came together to work on this plan. It was a great demonstration of collaboration and coordination to get this plan done. I'd like to thank Mr. Hawkins for his leadership and support on this plan. And lastly, but most importantly, I want to thank the stakeholders, because as I've mentioned a couple times already, they're the ones who really drove this plan and gave us the recommendations that we have here today. With that, I'll take any questions.
Thank you very much. Members of council or members of CIC should also know that in your package, of course, hopefully you've seen it, is the Accessibility Master Plan is also included as a document. Open it to questions. We'll start with Councillor Carlson.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Lutkowski, for the presentation, and I echo your thanks to all the folks who participated, especially the stakeholders. A lot of great information here moving forward. I did have a question. The plan almost entirely deals with physical access and physical accessibility and barriers in our physical buildings. But I did notice when I read the full plan that was attached, the master plan, there was at least a mention, except I couldn't find it addressed anywhere, but a mention of other barriers to folks accessing functionality in ways of technology or accessing City Hall, our online, our website, the telephonic experience, etc. I noticed that in our upcoming presentation on 311, there is a mention there of adding a chat room feature, which I think will be very helpful to those folks who may be nonverbal or have different communication skills. Is this the plan where we would look at those types of challenges in accessibility, or is that something else council needs to deal with in a different venue? Because I didn't notice it dealt with here, and maybe in the skim of the document I didn't catch it, but I couldn't find it anywhere. If you can help me with that.
Sure. So there is a recommendation. I think if you go back one slide, maybe another one. Enhance external communication and engagement. This is a pretty broad slide, and we also have some recommendations that are a little bit broader beyond these focus areas. And one of them is to improve the communication. It's to continue the engagement with the stakeholders, to have a couple times a year, have a dialogue with them, get some feedback from them. And that's where we're looking at the communication, where some of those items you mentioned. We are going to have to start looking at different ways that we can communicate, whether it's through a revised website, whether it's through, we talked about a mapping tool so people could go in and they can flag an area that's causing them trouble. So there is some discussion there about changing the communication techniques and enhancing the communication techniques for those who need it. I would just like to add one extra thing too. You are right about this. This plan is focusing on the physical mobility side, and that is intentional. The social accessibility side is no less important, just a little bit too big of a project to handle to try to do social and physical all in one document. So we did the physical side. You know, Tamara Mackey and her Diversion and Inclusive Working Group are doing a great job on the social side. So the two are going hand in hand as we move forward for total accessibility. I hope that answers your question. If not, let me know and I can try to clear it up even further.
Thanks, Chris. It actually does. I want to make sure it's being addressed somewhere. But if you say that Tamara, through our HR and inclusion and diversity position, is handling that, I'm keen to hear it. I've heard lots of challenges about people who, as I said, either are nonverbal or have a different language of choice, or use ASL, for example. Have had some issues, and I'm just hoping somebody's taking care of that. But if you say it is being looked at through our HR department, I look forward to an update on that at some point.
Okay, yeah, we will certainly work with the diversity and inclusion group to work on those things as well. I believe Tamara is working on some of that, but the MAMP is part of that working group, so we will certainly address that.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Mayor Spearman.
Thank you very much for the work you've done. It's an important reminder to council to provide services to those who we may not think of, and because we're able-bodied, and yeah, so I appreciate that. We continue. I see the in the what we heard slide, and hopefully there'll be some additional opportunity for further clarification and dialogue. There's a picture of a standard city bus that's been adapted. We've been adapting all their city buses to try and accommodate the needs of those people who are physically challenged. And then also a comment about accessoride capacity. So I'm suggesting that there might be concerns about the lack of accessoride capacity by some of our customers. At the same time, we're hearing that we're providing more accessoride availability than other cities of our size. So was there any clarification? Are there opportunities for people to use city buses that have been equipped to do so rather than accessoride, or how would we get around some of the conflicts in that messaging?
Yeah, so one of the key points that we did hear a lot was the challenges of accessoride and the problems of the system just being booked a lot, and people who really need it cannot get on there. There was a lot of mention about a revised criteria for accessibility, and that's one of the recommendations that came out of the plan. You're correct, the city buses have been retrofitted. Scott from Transit is here, and he could probably speak to to more your accessoride and transit questions better than I can. But yes, accessoride was a very key message that we heard. And it is something that we have to address because there are a lot of users who cannot use it. There's also a bit of a public education system that has to happen on the regular transit system, because I think there's a lot of people who are saying they can't use regular transit who probably can now with some of the improvements. And it's just a matter of getting some of that messaging out there. Is there anything you wanted to add, Scott? Okay.
You'd like to come up? Thank you.
I'm Scott Grieco. I'm the Transit Operations Manager for Transit. So just a few things with respect to transit. Some of the upgrades that we've made to transit, to name a few, is all of our buses are now low floor buses. They are equipped with 2 wheelchair positions. One of the positions is a system called the Quantum system, and we were one of the first transit properties in Canada to have this system. And our next project was the Stop Annunciation. So Stop Annunciation gave us the ability for the visual and the hearing impaired. So we're trying to look at transit as accessible transit when we talk about transit. And so in the report did identify a number of items in here about capacity issues. And obviously those issues do come forward in the operational review as well. But to identify that, that's where the report, like Chris had said, it identified that we need to take a look at our eligibility criteria. Does that help?
Yep, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Spearman. Councillor Crowson.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor. Thank you very much, Mr. Witkowski, for this presentation. This is absolutely vital work. I have some friends who have accessibility issues, and I know how they struggle, so I'm glad we are working on this. With regards to the 13 areas of focus, is there a plan to prioritize these, or is the plan to, when it's implemented, to look at all of them equally?
There are, so all these recommendations have been given a short-term, medium, or long-term plan or prioritization. The ones around, the earlier ones, A, B, C, D, E, those are going to be shorter term. Especially, like I said, the accessibility audits, we really have to get a good understanding of what the infrastructure is like before we can start making a bunch of standards changes, because we really have to know what it is that we have to change. So yes, each one of those does have a time frame put towards it.
Okay. On one of your slides, you have financial considerations, and you have new financing tools to be considered. Can you tell me a bit about how those were chosen and what impact those will have? Are they capital? Are they operating? Just can you walk me through a little bit? I know I read in the plan, but can you tell me some of these are quite different? The social impact bonds, for example. How are these chosen, and where did you get the ideas, and how would they work?
So we do have traditional funding models, which is the capital and the operating budget, and we did do the additional financial tools. A lot of these financial tools were taken from other municipalities, just looking what some other municipalities do. I am not a finance guy. I have to admit that up front. There's a reason I work in the Parks Department. So when you talk about social impact bonds, some of those things that are in there, I read the description in the master plan. I still kind of struggle with it a little bit, so you do have to forgive me on that one. As we start to look at some of the other financial tools, the key there is to getting the right people in the room to have that right discussion. So I apologize, I'm going to fall short on the answer around the social impact bonds. It is something that I can get some research on. I can submit a response back to you. I don't have a great answer for you today, other than if that's something that council wants to pursue, we will, for sure get the right people in the room and start investigating the different tools, so we're not relying just on those traditional capital and operating funding models.
No, I actually appreciate that you did look into other ways of financing them, and I think we will all learn more about those as we go ahead, so thank you very much. Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Crowson. Councillor Miyashiro. Councillor Miyashiro. Sometimes takes a moment.
Oh, sorry.
To unmute. There you go.
I was talking to a muted phone. Thank you, Mr. Witkowski, for your presentation, and I was following along in my office. Regarding Section H of your plan, collaborate to minimize winter challenges, I'm not sure, are you aware that the city has an age-friendly communities strategic plan as well that addresses snow removal for seniors?
I am not aware of that, but we will certainly take a look at it.
Yeah, and it's actually would fit right into this. So it was approved by council in January, and there is a section. One of the goals is to utilize neighbors and volunteers to help shut-in seniors to clear their sidewalks and driveways. So hopefully we can connect with the two plans and make this work.
Yeah, that would certainly be a big help, because from the city side, we look after the city infrastructure. When we get into sidewalks in front of residential houses, that's something where the city doesn't get involved in. I don't see that happening in the foreseeable future. So to be able to tap into that plan and have the two work hand in hand, I think would go a great way to improving the winter city challenges that we face.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Miyashiro. Councillor Campbell.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and thank you for the presentation. I was just wondering, and this may be too early to make any comment on it, but did the COVID-19 have an impact on anything in the last few months? And if so, is there anything that you can, moving forward, if this ever happens again, that you'd have to reconsider?
The only thing COVID-19 impacted for this project was this presentation. It was supposed to happen about 2 months ago, and it just kept getting delayed. Fortunately, we had all of the project done, all the stakeholder meetings, all of the work done prior to COVID. We did miss the last public engagement. We wanted to present the recommendations to the public one last time. That was scheduled for the March Get Involved Community Conversations event. That was going to be held here, I believe it was. That one got canceled. But we were able to bring the recommendations to the stakeholders in January. So I'm very happy that we at least got the recommendations to them. In terms of future COVID impact, so far what we've seen, it hasn't impacted construction too much. So a lot of the construction, the improvements that would come through current infrastructure projects or future infrastructure projects, doesn't look like they'll be impacted right now. Certainly, I would have to imagine that COVID, with everyone being encouraged to stay home, it is kind of keeping more people indoors. But how it's impacting this project directly, there really hasn't been a big impact so far.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Campbell. In the master plan, page 60, talks about some of the key actions. One of them is an accessibility think tank. Can you just expand upon that a little bit, please?
Yeah, so that is a group. Right now, we have a mobility accessibility working group, and that is internal to the city. That's just comprised of different business units, and that's really what started this plan. What we want to do, though, is start to get stakeholders and have more of a dialogue. It was a point where that working group would bring some stakeholders in about once a year, maybe once every 18 months, and we would just update what we've been doing. We want to have more of that interaction. So we want to do an accessibility think tank where some of the stakeholders that came and gave us the feedback for the master plan, we can carry that on a couple times a year. Even as special projects come up, have the ability to bring that concept to them and be able to get their feedback and understand what works for them and what doesn't. It's much easier to get that feedback from those groups up front than when we're ready to tender or even when we're in the middle of construction. So the goal there is really to just build an external network that we can converse with on a regular basis and on an ad hoc situation. I've already reached out to a few of the stakeholders talking about the accessibility think tank. We already have lots of interest in several groups that really want to participate. And those have been a lot of the stakeholders who have been conversing with us all along as well. So I really look forward to continuing that dialogue.
Okay, thank you. I don't know if this is to you or perhaps the city manager designate. Do we have an assessment of our infrastructure as to where we are on mobility and accessibility in our numerous facilities?
I'd refer to the Director of Infrastructure.
So we, yes and no. So we have some very specific work that was done on our facilities just in the last couple of years. It's a separate report to this, and it was essentially a comprehensive audit of buildings. We also have at least the beginnings of an inventory of the public realm. So I'm talking streets and sidewalks and the transit system as well, transit stops, to identify where we're in good shape in terms of universal accessibility and where we've got lots of gaps. So that work is in its early stages, and so we've got some additional audit work, inventory work to do. I think you'll never know exactly where you're at because our inventory is dynamic as well, and it's aging. So the need to do ongoing inventory and audits, accessibility audits, is really a critical aspect of our work at the city. So, but there are some foundational documents in place right now that supported the findings of the master plan and helped us do engagement as well with the stakeholder groups.
Okay, thank you. So will those documents then be accompanying the master plan when it comes back in July? That way council can see where we're at. If that could, Mr. City Manager, I think that might be helpful.
Yes, yep.
Excellent, thank you very much. My final question on this round And I don't see anybody else on the board, so if members of council have questions, or members of CIC have questions, please let me know. You also make reference in the master plan to changes to building code. Do we, as an organization or as individuals in the organization, work on anything with building code standards in the province? Are we on any committees that are looking at making some of these things actually code?
So we did have a member of Facility Services who was on the Alberta Building Code Council. I believe that was the appropriate committee. That individual has since retired. I'm not 100% sure if Facility Services has replaced that person on the Alberta Building Code Council. That's another one that I might have to get some information from Facility Services to get back to you. I don't know 100% where we're at with that one.
Thank you. Members of council, any additional questions?
Councillor Carlson here, sorry.
Oh, go ahead, Councillor Carlson.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and I'm sorry if I missed any response to this. I was having some issues with my phone, but it seems to be working fine now. A question on the plan. It is very much focused on the corporation, is what it seems. Can anyone tell me what we're thinking or doing, or if we are thinking or doing anything with the private realm, I guess? Folks downtown who may have 110-year-old buildings that are not accessible at all. Is there any ability for the corporation to influence or assist those folks if they want to become more accessible?
So the plan is focused on the corporation because that's where we have the greatest influence right now. We can't go back into a building or to any building owner and reinforce new standards. Buildings were built with the code at the time, and unless they come in for a different kind of development permit or building permit, that's when we can force new codes. So it starts with working internally, corporately, start improving the accessibility from within, and then start to build out. So that will be around planning and development, creating some new regulations that we can enforce on new developments or as new permits come up. It's also not just from buildings, but from an infrastructure side. It was when I talked earlier about testing ideas and about coming up with new ideas. Once we have a chance to kind of try out some of these new infrastructure models internally, that we can go out to the development industry and we could start implementing some of those in the new subdivisions and new development within the city. So it does have to start inside corporately, and that's why this plan focused on that.
Excellent. I appreciate that answer. You're right. It's where we have the most influence and can make or affect change more easily. I'm just wondering if we're having conversations with folks, with business owners, building owners, building operators, et cetera, to see if there are things they are thinking of doing or could be doing, if there's a way we can assist.
Yeah, so at this point with the master plan project, we didn't engage in specific landowners. We were trying to get a more comprehensive view of the accessibility in the city. Part of the implementation plan, it could be built into the accessibility think tank. It could be built into some of these recommendations, is to go out and start having that conversation with some of the business owners, get a little bit of an education system out there, and try to seek out some different stakeholders who have specific areas they'd like to focus on and try to work with them. But from the master plan project, we just we didn't have the resources or the time to really start getting into real specific buildings or areas of the city, so it took a more comprehensive approach.
Thank you. Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Maybe just then on that theme, you haven't at the moment then had conversations with organizations like BUILD, former Home Builders Association, or with the Lethbridge Construction Association, two groups that are building structures in our community? That would be sort of next step.
That would be next step, yeah. We didn't engage with BUILD yet, but again, going back to that accessibility think tank, that's our opportunity to really start to build our dialogue and our network and engage them at that time.
Thank you. I don't know if you want to answer this one or if the city manager wants to take this one, but let's assume that we, council actually approves this in July, which I would certainly hope that they do. How do we get people to think about this differently? You're absolutely correct. So our son navigates the world in a wheelchair and always will. So we are always looking at infrastructure And there are numerous places that you know somebody has done their job and they've done a very good job of putting in a curb cut or infrastructure, but it's not accessible. It's not mobility friendly. How do we get people to step outside what it is they're doing in their work and think about how this is going to impact somebody who's visually impaired or has mobility challenges?
It really starts, excuse me, with a public education campaign. October 30th, 2018 was the first public engagement session that we had. We had part of it in here. I gave a presentation on the hour, every hour for about 4 hours, and I heard a lot of great feedback from stakeholders, some very powerful messages. It was probably one of the most impactful days of my career, just hearing the different struggles that people have. So it really does come around about public education. Why are we doing what we're doing? And we have to get that message out there. I kind of want, my goal for this plan is to make accessibility to a point where when we get a project in front of us, we don't ask, why would we build accessibility into this? We say, why wouldn't we do it? You know, there are going to be times where you just can't really build as much accessibility in as you would like, but culturally, we have to start looking at it every time, and it can't just be an afterthought, a second thought. It kind of reminds me of safety. You know, a few decades ago, safety was just something that you kind of looked at as a second thought. Well, now it's one of the top priorities of anything we do, and that's really where I want accessibility to go. So I'm glad you asked that question because, you know, for me personally, it is about just getting that public education, getting the awareness out there. And if people are willing to share their stories that they shared with me on that day on October 30th, if we can get some of that messaging out there, I think it would really go a long way to the public understanding why we're making these improvements.
I'm thinking more internally though, because the public, the stakeholders can identify absolutely and easily. But internally, how do we get staff, how do we get council, how do we get everybody to actually focus on or to understand that this is another component of what it is that we do?
Yeah, so even internally, we would love to do more of those simulation exercises that I talked about. That is a goal in the master plan. It really is about, you know, about setting up a regular program where, you know, maybe we invest in a few wheelchairs and we invest in some canes. That 4-hour exercise had a dramatic effect on the 10 of us who did it. And I think anyone who tries to navigate City Hall with these vision goggles on and a cane, it has a huge impact. And it starts with simulation exercises. It starts with internal communication. Just like I talked about public education, it's not just about the public, it's about educating everyone internally too. If you can actually flip back, I think there was a slide here. Yep, sorry, go down right there. The master plan recommendations, the first slide, talks about clarifying the roles and responsibilities inside the city. We have the ability to be 5 different roles, and we can be all 5 at the same time, depending on what business unit we're working with and what group we're working with. So it's expanding the mobility accessibility working group. It's expanding the diversity inclusion working group. Lots of opportunities there to start to build this internally. And if we can get that support internally, that's just going to help build it externally as well.
Excellent, thank you. Any additional questions from members of council? Madam Clerk, nothing online? Thank you. Thank you very much for your presentation.
Okay, thank
Appreciate
you.
that. I have a motion from Councillor Croson, Mobility Accessibility Master Plan. Be it resolved that the Mobility Accessibility Master Plan be forwarded to July 13th, 2020 City Council meeting for future consideration. And further be it resolved that Chris Butowski be thanked for his presentation. Councillor Croson.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. As I said earlier, this is absolutely vital, and I thank everyone who was involved in this for all of their work. This affects many members of our community, members of our family, friends, etc., and it's important that we make our city work for everyone. And unless there's any debate, I will call the question.
I just wanted to add that, like members of CIC, when they're reading through the Mobility Accessibility Master Plan, well, we can certainly contextualize it around those that have mobility challenges. I know it's the objective of everybody sitting here and everybody watching and everybody in our community to be old someday. And sometimes with aging comes mobility challenges as well. So some of these recommendations that are in here actually accommodate us as we age, as we face challenges, as we face some barriers just through the natural life process. So while we can contextualize around helping a specific group within our community. I'd like us to all contextualize it around those that we know, those that we love, and our own objectives in terms of aging and getting around the community in a very healthy and a very safe manner as well. Any further debate? Seeing none, close. Councillor Croson?
Call the question.
Question's been called. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Members of CIC, are you wanting a 5-minute break or are you wanting to keep going? Bio break? Okay, we will take a 5-minute bio break and be back here at 2:40. We will resume the meeting. Thank you very much for your patience. Move to agenda item presentation 4.4, 311 update on first year operations. Mr. Travis Hillier, Corporate Customer Service Manager. Mr. Hillier.
Good afternoon, Deputy Mayor, and members of Council. I am here today to provide you with an update on our first year of operations at Lethbridge 311. What we're going to cover today, a little quick review, a bit of our numbers, some bold steps, key learnings, as well as some future plans. So as I'm sure you're well aware, we did go live to the public last March the 11th, 2019. But there was much planning that went into bringing 311 to life before that. It did start back in 2014 with U City Council approving D39 and as the integrated customer service strategy in the CIP of that year. Started really boots to the ground in 2016 with us going to our location in 2017 and taking those calls for all business units across the city in March of last year. The next two slides I know you guys have seen before, so I'm not going to talk too much about them, but you know, the why for 311. So this is what we did look like at the city pre-311, so it was a bit of a tangled web where people could call about multiple different areas and have to reach us in multiple different places. And with 311, we were able to centralize that and create that central, easy hub for people to connect with us with all of that information about all of our programs and services in behind. So the numbers. These numbers go from, again, March the 11th, 2019 to March the 10th, 2020. So it's a full 366 calendar days because it was a leap year. Almost 102,000 cases that we did log. 78% for information. I'm not going to read through all of these, but a couple that I'm really proud of. Only 4.6% of the calls were transferred, meaning that upwards of 95% of the calls were answered right there in 311. That's not to say we didn't have to put people on hold and talk to an expert to understand what was happening, but we were able to provide that one-stop shop for them. Other things that I think are impressive, almost 50% of the calls did actually originate through 311. So again, showing that our marketing and communication campaign to educate the public about 311 was pretty successful. And again, 300 plus knowledge articles on our knowledge base that are active on any given day. We actually have close to 600 in there, but because of seasonality, we only have a certain amount active each day. But that's what our call takers have to know is that many different things. This I think is probably my favorite slide. It looks a little bit like a heart graph, I think, and in it you can see those couple instances throughout the year where our customer service specialist would have maybe had a heart attack. The first big spike there is September the 30th, where we did have that very early snowstorm, lots of power outages and different things happening. This particular agent did take 137 calls that day, so a lot of calls. The one later in the year there is at the end of February, and again, that is weather related as well. It was a really windy day and had some power outages that day as well. But you can see that it's anything but predictable. Every day is a little bit different and the calls are ever changing. As I had said at the beginning, we are full service, meaning we do take calls on behalf of all business units across the city. But with that being said, two business units do make up about 60% of our calls, and that is waste and recycling and utilities. Again, there are little blips for all of them there, and it's actually interesting, I think, to note that our fifth highest call volume is actually for non-city things. So again, that's just people calling us that maybe asking for directions or hours of operations for businesses or all sorts of other different things. This is what it looked like throughout the year. You can see that we are definitely busier throughout the spring and summer months, and that has held true this year. Big peak again there at the beginning of October, end of September, and you can see it quiet down over the holidays when people are focused on different priorities. Months look exactly the same. You see that same breakdown with higher in the spring and summer and lower in the winter. Next two slides, again, I did want to talk about our two bigger areas. So when you look at utilities, people are calling about questions about their bill, moving into and out of their property, and unfortunately about payment arrangements. So those are our customers that are in financial difficulty. When you look at waste, waste is a lot more broad, a lot of deflection here. So again, you'll see in the next slide that service requests in waste are important, but definitely lots of questions about various things in waste and recycling as well. When you do look at those service requests, this looks very similar this year as well. Large item service being at the top and some of the pickup things. The two anomalies that we did have in 2019 as opposed to ongoing year are number 5 and 6, which is your card exchange blue and black. So there are close to 1,800 service requests there that were really people figuring out, do I want this size blue bin, this size black bin, and setting things up so that it made sense for them. So other than that, the other ones here look pretty much the same in 2020. Because we do take calls for utilities, we are required to do annual reporting to the Alberta Utility Commission, and as part of that, we do have to do an annual customer satisfaction survey. So we did do that in the fall of 2019, and this, well, the results I think speak to themselves. People really do like the 311 service. They think we're easy, helpful, courteous, and overall we provide great service to the community. We do have a business plan. Our business plan was created in 2017 along the same lines with all the other business units across the city, and because of that, our primary goal was actually to go live, and we were able to check that off of this year. But our other two bold steps were to design and plan 311. So that wasn't just to have 311 go live, but to actually make it better, to provide more services to citizens, to provide that reporting to business units so that they can make educated decisions. And as well, we do have a bold step about sharing our customer service model across the organization so that other areas, whether that's public operation or transit, that again, they're embracing that same level of customer service that we are. Some of our key learnings, I think the graph of the customer service specialist spoke to this, but things at 311 are predictably unpredictable. There's lots of things like taxes and fall leaf that we know are going to come year after year, but some of the biggest things that affect our call volume are things like weather, COVID-19 right now. Our call volumes, I know we're talking last year, but our call volumes are up 30% this year just because of the pandemic. So, it's those unpredictable things that have just as much effect as the predictable things. Some of the other things the survey showed, people love the ease of 311. We know things often before others know them. I joke about this, that the day the first sign came off the playground in the city saying, and we weren't even opening them yet, but the sign moved, people were calling saying, hey, are the playgrounds open now for the pandemic? So again, we know all of those things. I'm not going to read through all these, but I think the other one that I found very interesting was that people care a lot about garbage, and I know they're going to talk about curbside recycling right after this, but it is definitely an interest of our citizens. So some of our future plans, I've talked a little bit about these already, but standardized reporting. So we are right now building out reporting that's going to be available to the business units across the organization to make that database decision making. We're looking at piloting 311 here at City Hall. We are in the process of procuring live chat as well so that people can engage digitally with us, and always looking to expand those offerings to the business units across the city. We are full service, but we're always looking at enhancing that and making it better for our internal customers as well. And with that, I'll open it up for questions.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Hillier, for the presentation and certainly for the work. Madam Clerk, do you have anybody online yet? I don't have anybody on my board. Maybe I'll ask the first question then. What do you do with the data? How does the data inform certainly 311, but perhaps other business units?
Yeah, and that's, again, we're working on building it out. So we do record all of the call data. So we know the nature of each call. So is it a transit or public operations? So we have all that. We do share it a bit ad hoc right now with business units. So especially some of our higher volume customers like transit, waste and recycling, utilities, we do share that information with them. But we are in the process right now, now that we are getting a little bit more stable, although COVID-19 throws a bit of a wrench in that. We are building out standardized monthly reports that will be available to business units and distributed on a regular basis so that, again, they understand the nature of the calls coming in, the location of them again, so maybe there would be a heat map that they could look at that, so to understand maybe certain requests are coming from certain areas or different things like that. So again, it's taking the data that we have now that we've got it structured in a good way, and actually packaging that in a meaningful way for business units so that they can make those decisions.
So if we looked at the top service requests and number 2, missed pickup, 1,554 in your survey frame. That's the type of thing then that would be passed on an ongoing basis to waste recycling,
Correct.
who then could, as you say, through heat map or something else, identify that, well, maybe we've just got some infrastructure, some challenges in this particular area. Okay, excellent.
Exactly.
Thank you. One of the things that I know I've heard feedback from, and I think a couple of my colleagues as well, is a hesitancy from the public to sign up for an account if they're doing things online, because you can access 311 online.
Yep.
What happens when I sign up? What happens to the data? What happens to the information, my personal information?
Yeah, so again, really from an account perspective, we're actually collecting the most minimum amount of information we want. It's a name, a telephone number, and an email address is actually all that we're requiring from an individual. Some of the service requests you may request through there would be geo-based. Often they're not at your property. They would be a pothole or something like that. But we are trying to make the sign-up process as simple and easy as possible, but recognizing that sign-up process is important, so that we often what does happen, it's great when we have all of the information that we require to process a request, but quite often from the operations side of things, they will need to clarify information or schedule a time, or there's different things that do need to happen there, where that knowing that individual and having that email address or telephone number becomes critically important. So again, we're not collecting a lot. It's not shared with anybody. It's stored safely here in Canada, and it's good.
Good. Okay. Thank you, Councillor Carlson.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Hillier, for the update and the information you presented. We had a presentation earlier today on accessibility, and I was pleased to see that 311 is looking at a live chat room, which may kind of assist some folks who may have some challenges in that area. Are there any other challenges that 311 has noticed in communicating or connecting with our members of our community? Folks who have hearing or speaking difficulties, or ESL as language of first choice. Any of those that are arisen, and are we looking at ways to mitigate or minimize those difficulties with communicating with our community?
Yeah, I think so. We've actually recently engaged with our PSCC, the 911 center, about what they do for ESL or for translation services. We're generally pretty well equipped, and there's not a lot, but there are definitely times where that service would be beneficial, and we are actually in the process right now of looking to implement that translation service. So again, if somebody is trying to communicate with us in a different language, then the CSS, the customer service specialist, can speak, that we are able to do that. And again, as you did indicate, live chat obviously would be provide some accessibility benefits to the public as well.
Thank you so much. I appreciate hearing that you're alive for those and working at solutions. Thank you. Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Carlson. Councillor Campbell.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. And again, thanks for this great information. I just, when you say future plans, 311 at City Hall, what exactly does that mean? I mean, people are phoning about City Hall as it is now, right? But what does that mean?
Yeah, so what we're looking at is a face-to-face presence. So again, it would be different than calling in. The person here at City Hall wouldn't be on the phone per se, but they'd be an general information desk. So again, we have a lot of very specialized services here at City Hall, like utilities, tax regulatory services, but not everybody would have a presence here on the main floor.
So it's a physical presence for 311. Gotcha.
Correct.
Thank you.
Any other questions from members of CIC? Mayor Spearman.
Interesting about in-person service. Given what we've learned with COVID-19, would it be possible another version of a chat is sort of what's any of these technologies that you have access to someone live, but actually speaking to you visually?
Yes, so to that, if one of the things that we did talk about with live chat and when we do get that rolled out to the community is the potential of maybe having something like a kiosk as an example at City Hall, where again you're speaking with a live person, but there's not actually a physically live person present. So yeah, there's a number of different ideas that we're exploring and evolving, and definitely COVID-19 has been presented interesting challenges to the entire organization. And obviously today, first day that City Hall is reopened to the public, and I know one of our strong messages to the public is come in if you need to do business, but if you can do it do that business with us remotely, whether that is by calling 311 or online, that obviously we want to recommend those channels to the public right now for sure.
Thank you.
The question on follow-up, if somebody does contact 311 with a question, something about pothole or something about garbage, waste, is there a process then internally where there is a follow-up, or there's the potential for follow-up with that individual?
Yep. Yeah. So for any of the service request, our business integration team has spent an awful lot of time working across the organization with business units, understanding the service levels for those various areas. So again, when a service request is requested, that service level is communicated to somebody, and in some instances that service level would include a callback naturally. In other instances, that would be a special request for a callback. The other option again is through the either the self-serve portal or even over the phone when somebody is signing up. They do have the option to subscribe to that request. So again, via email, they would get updates to say the status of it has changed from open to in progress to closed, or whatever the different statuses may be for that particular request. So to answer your question, yes, if people want it. There's a lot of times where people are happy just reporting the request though, and they don't require that follow-up as well.
Excellent, thank you. Any further questions from members of CIC? Hearing none, thank you. If members do have a question, we just call 311. We'll
Absolutely.
Excellent, thank you very much. Thank you for your presentation, and congratulations on a successful first year. Thank you. I have a motion in front of me from Councillor Campbell, Lethbridge 311 Annual Update. Be it resolved that the Community Issues Committee accept this report and presentation for information, and further be it resolved that Travis Hillier be thanked for their presentation. Councillor Campbell.
What a great first year of this program. It's amazing what all the positive aspects of this. If there's no other questions or any other debate, I will ask for the vote.
Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Moving on to presentation 4.5, Curbside Recycling Program First Year Update. Joel Sanchez, Waste and Recycling Utility Manager. Mr. Sanchez.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor and members of Community Issues Committee. So I'm here today to do the update for the first year of Curbside Recycling. Similar to 311, we started the program a month later in May of 2014. Before I start, I just want to do a quick recognition of the project team. It's not only myself, but we had a lot of people from different areas within the city, from corporate communications, from public operations, from administration staff, facility services, and contractors that help us to get where we are right now. Next slide, please. So to begin with, I just want to remember why we started with curbside recycling. So you recall that in November of 2015, City Council approved a CC 54, which is the waste diversion policy, and that set the targets for 2021 and 2030. Those targets are on the residential side, 180 kilograms per capita by 2021, and 140 kilograms per capita on 2030. With the approval of curbside recycling in 2016, we started with the project itself. We have different areas where we start the construction of the MRF and the procurement of the equipment. If we look at before curbside recycling, the composition of the black cart, we only have the garbage cart. It was 47% organics materials, recyclables were 25%, and waste, actually waste, what can go to the landfill or should go to the landfill was only 28%. 72% of all the materials that were in the black cart before curbside recycling could be diverted from the landfill. If we look at this policy, the next year for 2021, we have in 2019 now the biweekly curbside recycling implemented. The original plan was to go in 2021 with a weekly or biweekly model on curbside organics collection. And waste was going to remain biweekly on the service. During the program maturity, the expectation was to achieve 65% of diversion from the landfill. So we started curbside recycling with a phase one. In this part of the program, we did a pilot, what we call the pilot or phase one. We had 1,000 homes implemented through the city, and we tested different methodologies, different approaches, and we just want to make sure all the material and all the information that we were going to deliver was applicable when we go to the citywide implementation. During this time that we were doing phase one, we started the construction of the MRF, or the Material Recovery Facility, and this was completed in April 2019. And at the same time, April, May of 2019, we delivered approximately 34,000 carts through the city for the residents. A quick update on the numbers for curbside recycling again. We started in May 14 for single-family dwelling units. All the carts were delivered at that time, and after 1 year of the program, on average, we see that 65% of the residents, they put out their blue cards for a collection, which is a really good number. We were usually programs that are mature, they see a number around 70%. We have a good capture at this point. And we also had a city staff visiting each household in the city at least 4 times last year. This is what we call the oops tagging. We were checking the carts to make sure the quality was there. And only 7% of those carts that were checked had a tag attached to them or were not collected because they had different contaminants for the program. For the multifamily service on the residential side, we started the implementation of July of last year. On this group, again, what the approach was to do a phase approach. We implemented those ones that has less than 45 units, and the implementation, to date, we have done 80% of that group. We only have roughly, I will say, 400 households to be implemented on the multifamily. That's about 25 sites. And phase 2 is going to be implemented starting in January 2021, and the plan is to finish that implementation by December 2021. Phase 2, I have to mention that today we have implemented 20% of this group. And you see that originally the plan was to implement them later, but we have a few of the complexes through the city approach us, and they didn't want to wait. They were really eager to have the program in place, and we have implemented those since July 2019. When we deliver multifamily too, I just want to mention that, we do it through a consultation approach where we talk to each one of the sites, the condo boards and associations, and we find a solution that works best for them. So in some cases, we deliver a cart if they want to have a cart because they prefer to have the ownership on each one of the units. And in some areas, we deliver 6-yard bins, depending on what the needs and the space that they have. So now moving a little bit into the numbers. For the first year of curbside recycling, as you can see here, of all the tonnage that we collected in 2019, or since May 14, 2019 up to May 14, 2020, 15% has been recyclable materials. 85% is garbage or garbage and organics, is what is remaining on the black cart. And here we can see the recycling depots. So this graph is a comparison. We have from 2018 up to 2020. We can see the decline in use on the recycling depots. So since we started the program in 2019 in May, we see that blue bar has been significantly reduced. I will say we were expecting to have close to 50% of reduction, and I think we have achieved that. If you see the number for this year, 2020, if we look at May, we are probably a third of what we used to be in 2018. Now let's look at the whole recycling spectrum. So when we look at the recyclable materials, it's not only the curbside, but it's also the tonnage that we get from the depots. We can see here that we are receiving 22% of the recyclables through the recycling depots, and 78% is coming through curbside recycling, which means that we have pretty much have an increase of 120% or 118% of recyclable materials that we are collecting from the residents. So now let's look at the garbage. Similar to what we had before for the recycling depots, on the garbage, we see a reduction on the garbage being collected at the curb. There is only one exception. If you look at May of 2020, we actually collected more garbage this year than last year. And this is a result we believe is COVID. We have seen the numbers increase. Most people are mostly at home. They're probably consuming more. And it's not only here, but it has been also in Calgary and other communities. When we have talked to them, it's been common to see that that tonnage has increased a little bit more in this year on the residential side. Something else I want to mention here, in 2018, before curbside recycling, the per capita number was 250 kilograms. After the implementation of curbside recycling, that number has dropped to 213 kilograms per capita. And again, a comparison between the black cart before and after curbside recycling. So we see we still have 10% of recyclable materials in the black cart. And this is part of the work that we're trying to do on the education and outreach. We know the program to be mature is going to take between 2 or 3 years. And the work and the focus in the next few months will be to try to capture that 10% that we still have on the black cart. Now let's look about processing all the recyclable materials. So from everything that we get, around 80% or 82% is what we call fibers. So that will be cardboard, paper. The remaining materials are plastics, is only 4%. And the contamination has been really low. This is also another success in our program. When we look at other communities across Canada, contamination is usually between 15 and 20%. It really paid off to come late to the game. We were able to take those materials that were contaminants, are not part of the program, and we have seen a huge success in the contamination side being that low. Now if we look at the materials that we have shipped, to date, this is, for me, is probably the biggest success of the program. We have been able to ship everything that we have collected from the residents. All the materials that we have processed have been able to be shipped to different places across North America. And the next slide has a little bit of explanation where the materials are going. So the 89% of materials, the fibers, again, cardboard, paper, mixed paper, and newspaper, has been shipped across Canadian and US mills, everything. On the next slide, 7% of the materials are plastics, and they have been shipped within Canada. Everything is going to a local processor in Canada. And 3% of the materials that we have collected are metals, and all these have been shipped to Canadian and US recyclers as well. This graph, I wanted to have it here to give you guys an idea of how the market moved for the recyclable materials. We can see here that in this particular case is cardboard. It used to be in a value of 150, 170 in 2017. There was a big drop in price. In 2018, it went down to 80. And just as we started the program, it went down to $10 a ton. It has recovered again, but we see these changes every 2-3 years where the prices are going up and down. The average price that we consider is a price that we have budgeted and we're looking to target is around $30-$35 per ton. Now, looking at the financial update, the program has been balanced. If we look at the expenditures, we have spent $5.4 million in the recycling program during the first year. And all the revenue, and this revenue is including the commodity revenues plus the collection that the fees that are paid by the residents are $5.4 million. So it's pretty much on a balanced situation. The last slide that I have basically is a breakdown of all the fee that the residents pay today. When we look at this slide, $26.20 is the fee that the residents pay. 34% is allocated to garbage collection. 34% is allocated to recycling. And the remaining of the amount is spent in different programs that we offer, like large item service, clean community, free Saturday, and life cycle and debt services for all the assets that we own. So next step, we're going to continue with the multifamily implementation. As I mentioned before, the plan is to start with those over 45 units in January 2021 and have them completed by December 2021. We want to focus on the upstacking process again in the fall. The idea was to do this in this spring, but again, with COVID, we couldn't do this. We postponed that to the fall. One of the benefits why we have been able to market all the materials is because of the quality. Some of the recyclers, they are really happy with the quality that we have, and we have had no issue to move the materials. And that's why we want to make sure we focus on the quality for the program. And finally, will be program maturity, achieve that 10% that we still have in the black card.
Thank you, Mr. Sanchez. Thank you for your presentation. We do have questions from members of CIC, starting with Councillor Croson.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Thank you again, Mr. Sanchez, for your presentation and for your work. I'm sure, as you know, though, Council never hears from happy groups. We always hear from people who have concerns. And we've been hearing from quite a few people who have concerns with multifamily, introduction of recycling into multifamily units. And so some of the questions they've been asking us, and I would like to ask you, is about the cost, the $7 per month, how that is working, the number of bins, their old recycling programs, if they can keep them. So what are you saying to these multifamily apartments and complexes, and how are you working through this consultation program with them?
Yeah, thank you for the question. That's a really good question. We have been working with the multifamily group, as I mentioned before, since July last year. To date, we have implemented roughly 55% of this group. Those ones are more than 45. We haven't had any issue within this group. With that being said, since last year, we have been having a few meetings with some of the large condo boards in the city. There are 3 or 4 in particular that they are not really happy with the program fee, the $7 that are being applied for them. We met with them last year, and what we told them originally is that we are going to work through the system. We haven't implemented Curbside Recycling before, so we needed to have some data and some numbers in order to do an evaluation of the program. And then we met again this year in February. At that time, we had at least 6 months and some data for the multifamily, and we were able to confirm that based on the type of equipment that we use, based on the numbers of bins that we collect, the cost for the program is $703 is actually the total cost that we got. That includes all the wages, include an overhead truck for multifamily, as I mentioned before. The approach is that we deliver, we give them a small container that they can have in each one of the households, and then they can transfer the recyclables to the bigger containers. They can decide if they want to have carts. Some sites, they say, we want to have carts, and they have 30 carts, 40 carts at the site. Other sites, they say, you know what, we don't want to give a parking space, so we want to have 3 big metal bins, and that's what it works for us. So that is the part that we have been working with the phase 1 of the multifamily so far, and we have been very successful. For the phase 2, again, after doing a review of all the costs, the equipment, the labor, the tipping fee that we do at the MRF, We need to remember these overhead trucks can only fit probably 30, 50 stops a day, depending on how full are the bins. So there is a different methodology that we need to do for them. And $7 to date is the rate that will cover all the expenses that we have to have a program that is balanced.
Okay, thank you. And following up, if people are having concerns, it is best that they contact you and sit and talk with you about the program?
Yes, that's correct. So what we have been doing is that we encourage them to get in contact with myself, and then we have one technician that will do a consultation. What they do is they do a site visit. They talk to the condo board or to the different people at the site, and they look for the best solution for them. If they still are not happy with the approach, they can come back and talk to me. We set up meetings. As I said, we have to have to date probably 3 meetings with this group, and we have been trying to explain all the different cases that why are we having this cost, how is the program being implemented, and what are the options that they have. Most of the options, again, are in the program delivery, but the cost is the $7 that we have today.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Croson. Councillor Carlson.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Kaufman. Thank you, Mr. Sanchez, for the presentation. Thanks to your team for all the work and information they've provided us. You answered my first question, which is about our contamination rates. Good to hear that ours are, I think what I heard is about half what other communities are experiencing, so that's kudos to our community. I hope we keep that up. Second question, one of your slides referenced, I think it was 1% of what's coming into the MRF is beverage containers. 1% doesn't sound like much, but I think I saw it was 29 tons. What's the value of that, and how where does that fall? Is that just in the revenue stream for the MRF?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So beverage containers, you're right, that's 1% of the total tonnage that is coming to the facility. When we did this project at the very beginning, we had the consultant that helped us to set it up. He mentioned that we will get some beverage containers, that some people, they don't care, they just put it into the recycling bin. And the budget amount that we had was $25,000 a year. That was an estimate. He said that's on average what you get. We were surprised to see that this revenue was close to $65,000 last year. So again, the containers are going, the recommendation that we do to the residents is for the beverage containers, it's better if you collect them and you go to the depots and you get the refund. But if they are not willing to do that, they can place those into the blue bin, and they will be part of the revenue of the commodity sales.
Okay, thank you. It's kind of like a nice donation from our residents. Next question, the depot use. I think what you said was the numbers in May are about a third of what they were a year and a half or 2 years ago. Are we seeing a decrease in expenses that relates to that?
So basically with the depots, we have seen a decrease. We knew this was going to happen, and accordingly, when we did the past budget, we reduced the amount that was going to the depots. If my memory works well, we used to have a budget of around $300,000, $325,000, and that budget was reduced to $250,000 moving forward. So there is a $75,000 savings on that area that were reflected in the last operating budget that we presented to council.
And if the numbers are going down, like as you're saying, about a third of the use, will we see a further reduction in that budget?
At this point, I don't think that reduction will happen again. There are fixed costs with the site itself. The reduction was mostly due to less amount of bins that have to be hauled to the MRF for processing the material. So we are now at that point. We have reduced the hauls. In the past, we used to have somewhere between 12 to 15 bins being moved for processing. Today, we're doing only 6 to 7. And that number we expect is going to maintain over the next few years. On the depots, though, one plan that we're doing right now, we're having a project where we're looking at the depots and see what options do we have, what other possibilities we can offer to the residents on the depots. This could be like a yearly roundup where we can take electronics in one of the sites certain times and give the residents the opportunity to have a better use of the sites.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Carlson. Councillor Morrow.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Mr. Sanchez, you earlier were talking about the $7, and you said that that's what it costs to do business of recycling. Can you tell me a little more specific? What is it that my $7 pays for?
Thank you for the question. So when the program was approved, there was an incremental $7 fee, right, added to the residential utility bills. This fee will pay for the debenture of all the assets that we have built for the recycling. It pays for the collection of the recyclable materials. It also pays for life cycle of the carts for the residents or bins for multifamily. It will be paying for the processing or the operations of the MRF and the marketing of the materials. So that's pretty much the breakdown for those $7.
Okay, because what I'm hearing more than anything, I'm actually not hearing that people are against the curbside recycling. But they're struggling with the fact that pre-blue bin recycling, people were paying whatever it was, I can't remember, $18 a month or whatever it was, for once a week garbage pickup. And I'm going to refer to Deputy Mayor always said, we shouldn't even call it garbage. It's just it's waste. Whether it's recycling, whether it's organic, or whether it's real garbage, we're getting rid of stuff. So all we've done in my mind, and what people are telling me, is we've replaced a black bin with a blue bin, and we alternate. So my black bin, and I've asked this over and over, and I still don't seem to have an answer that I'm satisfied with that I can pass on. Why is it that we need to charge the extra $7 when you've reduced my garbage pickup by half? You're talking about all these savings now. You know, the recycle centers are saving you money. People aren't going. So it's working. Why do we need to charge the $7? And let me ask a second question to that. We're trying to do a one-size-fits-all. So if you have a 12-unit apartment complex, you're expecting me as that owner to have 12 black bins and 12 blue bins. I don't have the space for that. And yet you're forcing me to, and the people that I'm talking to have said, we'll pay the $7. We don't want to, but I don't want 12 bins. I don't want 24 bins. So to me, the biggest thing is price. Why can't we provide recycling and forget the $7? Because that should be absorbed in everything else that we've been paying as part of garbage pickup. I can't answer that. Can you help me?
Yeah, I will try to do my best. So if we remember, before curbside recycling, the fee was $13.60, I believe it was, for garbage weekly. The incremental fee was $7 only to implement recycling. And the only reason it was $7 was because some of the funding for the black car was moved to recycling. Yes, we did. We did a few times. So in reality, garbage, $2 from the garbage collection moved to the recycling. The recycling cost is $9, but because we were moving garbage from a weekly collection to bi-weekly collection, some efficiencies were there, and we transferred that amount for the recycling. So in reality, when you look at single family, the cost that they're paying is $9 for the recycling service bi-weekly. So that's one of the points. Again, when we implemented recycling too, what we tried to do is now we only added 2 additional trucks instead of adding.
But wait a minute, sorry to interrupt. You just finished saying that, okay, and I remember that we took $2 from garbage and added it. So technically my real cost for recycling is $9, but you're taking it from garbage. Forget that. It's all one, whether it's recycling, whether it's organic, whether it's garbage. People look at it as, I'm paying X amount of money per month to get something picked up. I don't care what color bin it's in. So why do we have to charge, is what I'm trying to understand.
Yeah. So if we can go back to just that breakdown right there. So you see here what people are paying today is $26.20. And that $26.20 is including the $150, which is the landfill charge that all residents pay, and the waste reduction fee, which is $3.60. For waste collection, and that includes the black card and the blue card, they pay $21.10. When you look into that $21.10, it's not only the collection of the black and the blue cards. Included in that fee, we also have what we call the LIS, or Large Item Service. All the residents in the city, they have 2 opportunities during the year where they can call us, and we will go to their house and we will pick up large items. They can have a fridge, they can have a mattress, a couch, whatever they have. We do that service, and that's included as part of the $21.10. And if you remember the previous presentation, LIS is actually one of the most popular programs. It's one of the top categories in the service request. It's also included what we call the clean community. And this is when we get complaints from the city. There is a mess in the alley, there is a problem, we need to go there and clean it. So that's part of that fee. It's also included another program that is very popular, and we found this out during COVID. Due to COVID, we need to close the landfill on Saturdays. And there were a lot of people that were upset about this, why the landfill is closed. I can't use my free program. So that is included in that $21.10. All the residents, they can go every Saturday to the landfill, and they can dispose of up to 250 kilograms. On that $21.10 is also the life cycle, because we give the cards to the residents at the very beginning, and then every 10 years, or whenever that car is damaged, we replace the card.
For free?
For free, every 10 years. Now, if the car gets lost or they don't know what it is before that 10-year cycle, then they need to pay for the replacement card. But we cover the life of the car, which is 10 years. Again, when we look at the program itself, it's not only the collection side. We also need to account for different programs that we have, and that's why we try to explain to everybody, even for the multifamily. When we have met with the group, one of the concerns is that we pay the city already $2,100 a month for the complex, and you guys don't pick up our garbage. And what we have told them is, remember, what you guys are paying the city, even though if they have a private contractor to collect the garbage, what they pay the city is that landfill charge that all the residents in the city, they have to pay that. And they also pay what we call the waste program fee. Since we don't collect the garbage, they still have access to LIS, so they do, and they called us for LIS, they have that service. They still have access to free Saturday, every Saturday of the year. And they also benefit from all the other programs that we have included in that rate.
Okay, thank you. I'll believe everything you said for now. But my final question, if I may, Deputy Mayor, is to maybe the city manager through the treasurer. And I don't know if you can, I don't know if it is. If it already is, I guess I would have to sit down with you and understand it. Is there an exact breakdown of recycling costs and revenue brought in from recycling and recycling costs separate than garbage revenue and garbage recycling? Can you provide that? Can you provide that for me? So that, because people are asking me, and I seems to me that everything's lumped together.
So it's actually on the screen right now. This is the revenue and expenditure only for recycling. So if you look at the whole waste and recycling utility, our budget is close to $18 million a year. So these $5 million expenditures that we have is only relating to recycling, and the revenue that we have here is only related to recycling. Similarly to this, we have the revenue for the landfill or the operations, the processing of all the materials, and we have the revenue and expenditure for the waste program.
Sorry, so you're saying that expenditures for recycling only is $5.4 million a year?
Yes.
And we're generating 5.4, so it's pretty much offset.
Yeah.
But what did you say about 18 million?
Is the total department operating budget.
Okay, so in our books, Madam Treasurer, do we have those separate? All I'm asking. And you don't need to answer that now, but at some point,
So we break out waste processing and waste collection within our financial information currently, but we do break out, we do have the information, it's just that we publish it as a collection as opposed to breaking it out individually.
would you be able to do that? Besides this, because this I don't think is adequate for the people that are asking me.
I guess I would need to understand what you're looking
Okay.
for if that's not adequate, but yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Campbell.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and thank you for the presentation. Just want to switch gears a little bit because I mean, when all this was happening, plastics was a big thing about the inability for us to have a market. Obviously, according to the, we have 7% of our garbage is plastics, and we're selling it to market. Do you see in your any kind of crystal ball that that's ever going to change? Are we in an anomaly in Canada as far as a city this size that we're able to get our plastics out to market? And I mean, or where are we with that?
Thank you for the question. So if we look at the breakdown, plastics right now is only 4% of what we receive at the MRF. We have been able to move all this, and if you recall, when we designed the program, we made the decision to not have plastic bags. Because again, other communities that have that included, they found that, number one, they didn't have any market for plastic bags. They were really hard to recycle. Number two, they get tangled in the equipment, which breaks down and also downtime for the MRF. So considering those similar to glass, we decided no glass and no plastic bags into the program. And we have seen that in the last 2 years, other communities are doing that. They're actually taking the glass now and they're taking the plastic bags, which has been a little bit difficult because now, again, it's more education to the residents that were used to have those items there. If we look at the plastics itself on that 4%, I will say that those hard to recycle, we still get a small percentage. Out of that 4%, it could be a 0.2. And what we have done, we have worked with our broker and the processor of the plastics, and they have accepted a small portion of those materials with the good to recycle ones. So they can take, let's say, an 80-20% or 85-15%, so we have been able to do that. Again, when we look at the size of our city and you talk to other cities our size, Red Deer, they use the same commodity broker that we have used to date, so they haven't had any issues. When you look at bigger communities like Calgary, they generate 10 times more than what we generate, and then that's when it becomes an issue to move those materials. In our case, to date, we have been really lucky. We have had a good partner, and we have a process in place. The equipment that we have is really good separating the material, and that's another benefit. When we did this project, we went to at least 5 or 6 different municipalities in Alberta. We visit their MRF, and we see how they did it, and we try to learn from all the issues that they had, and we built this MRF that is being considered by people that has visited one of the top MRF in Alberta, if not in the country.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Campbell. Just to follow up on that, Mr. Sanchez, just to reaffirm what you said, you're saying about 0.2% of the plastic. Now, are you relating to that as being the relative to the overall amount of recycling? So 15% is what I'm hearing then. 15% of the plastics we receive is not recyclable? Approximately.
No, it's less than that. I say 0.2% of the 4% that we get. So it's really a small amount. I will say if you want to have a whole number for all the plastics that we get, it's going to be less than 2% or 3%.
Just relative to plastics or to the entirety?
Relative to plastics.
Relative to plastics. Yeah. Okay, thank you. And we are currently, what we remove then at the MRF that's not acceptable that the retailers are not going to take, we are just putting into the landfill. Is that correct?
In some cases, at this point, we haven't put anything to the landfill. As I said before, they are taking it. What they can do is to take a full load of this type of plastics. So we have been blending those in with the good to recycle, and they're able to process those.
Okay, that's interesting. What are we doing with the glass and plastic bags then? Are they being stored or are they going into the landfill?
So plastic bags, the ones that we get at the depots, we have, I don't know the number from the top of my head, but I will say less than a truckload of those that have been baled. And we are working with the same processor that we're using today, had a plan to build a facility in Alberta. They are located out east, and they have also a few pilots where they want to start recycling plastic bags, like they do in Europe and other places. So we're just holding that material for that opportunity. In case of the glass that we have at the depots, actually, at the end of last year, beginning of this year, we finished all the processing of the concrete and the glass and the marble at the Waste and Recycling Center. All the glass has been crushed, and the plan is to use the glass as an alternate or substitute for aggregates, for pathways. It can be used in lanes as well. In some cases, it could even be used as a landscaping element. All the concrete that we have crushed as well is being used in local projects to supplement or to replace virgin aggregate from the materials that are being used.
Thank you. So currently we're storing both of those products. Nothing's going into the landfill.
Nothing is going to the landfill.
Okay,
yeah.
thank you. The slide that you had up there that showed the monthly breakdown of average utility bill on waste and recycling had the 2160 or there we go. Yeah, 2110. And within that 2110, you identified that the large item service is included in that?
Yeah, that's correct.
What is the cost of that on each bill then? A breakout of that 2110?
If my memory, I could do the math, but I think it's like 70 cents per household. 65 to 70 cents per household.
Okay, thank you. Any additional questions from members of CIC? Mayor Spearman?
Just want to go back to just would like to go back to the multifamily units. Some multifamily units are concerned about the pending adoption of the city program because it's going to cost them more money than a program they already have in place. Can you explain the difference between programs they have in place and the program that the city offers?
Yes, I probably can explain 100% about the different programs they have in place. When we have met with them, they have mentioned that they do have a private recycler. It's actually one of the companies that used to be on the residential side where we had those consultations and they were directed to the ICI sector. And they do collect cardboard, plastics, they say as well, glass and other materials. So they have a similar approach on the type of materials that they are collecting. What I don't know is what happens with those materials. Are those materials going to somewhere else within the city? Where do they recycle those? That's information we don't have. I know we have a conversation with one private recycler about using the recycling depots, again, because those are residential only. And we reminded them that they are an ICI customer. They need to go either to an ICI private facility or they need to go to the city MRF in order to dispose of those materials. Again, what they told us is that they have a program in place where they can recycle. We cannot verify where that material goes. It certainly is not coming to our MRF, so it might be going to another MRF, local MRF, or out of town. We don't know those details.
Thank you.
Do you have data available for members of council on large item service in terms of number of calls, amount of weight, things of that nature?
Yes, we do.
If I could ask that at some point be provided to council, that'd be appreciated, please. Thank you. Any additional questions from members of CIC? Madam Clerk, nothing online? All right, excellent. Thank you very much, Mr. Sanchez. Thank you for the update and the report. I have a motion from Councillor Carlson, Curbside Recycling Program First Year Update. Be it resolved that the Community Issues Committee accept this report and presentation for information, and further be it resolved that Joel Sanchez be thanked for their presentation. Councillor Carlson.
No, thank you, Deputy Mayor. Once again, thank you for the presentation, Mr. Sanchez. Thank your team for the information provided herein. I think it's valuable information for council as we monitor the success and challenges of this program as it matures. I'm very pleased to see some of the good news stories coming out, especially our rates of contamination, our rates of use. I hope that at the next update we see further good news stories. Unless there's anything further from my colleagues, I will call for the vote.
Anything further from members of CIC? Seeing nothing, questions been called. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Thank you. We do have a motion from Mayor Spearman that we move to a closed session. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. It will take us about 5 minutes to make the transition to closed session.